start that. Okay. Welcome everyone. There was a bit of confusion about venues and times, so just bear with us, and also just as people make their way here. So welcome, thanks for coming to this session. Each of us is going to speak for about 7 to 10 minutes and then maybe have a short response to each other, and then we really want to open it up to your questions and also possibly to a conversation. Just to begin, it's my honour to ask Rabbi Melchior to open our session. I had the pleasure of hosting him in Australia in 2006 for the Abraham Interfaith conference, and it was organised by the Australian Intercultural Association, which are Turkish Muslims in Melbourne, Australia, part of the Gulen movement. And basically, as well as many other things, I learned from that visit the centrality of relationship. I had been invited by one of their leaders to go to his home, which was over an hour away from where I lived for years, and I never went there. And Rabbi Melchior then also was a member of Knesset, and he was invited by this person and basically went, in his 2 days or 3 days in the country, and so that was a big learning, and also learning for me, and also just having the kind of like hope, giving a sense of the vision that I didn't need to abandon Torah in order to be who I wanted to be individually and who I wanted us to be collectively.
Thank you very much. This was supposed to be in English, but we prefer an Australian. It's really much nicer. I would like to follow this. A couple of you were at my last session. Most were not, so shouldn't be punished for that. But those who were shouldn't be punished. I spoke about Israel being a Jewish and democratic state, and maybe I will start from where I left there, because this is, I think, a very important part of this, that we are here peoples in the Middle East in general, I think all over the world, most of the world, who have very strong identities, and our identities are very much intertwined with the tradition of our homes, where we come from, very much close to our religion, and often we are in Israel being forced to choose between our identity, between our religion and peace. Before we talked about it in different circumstances, also between human rights and democracy and so on, but this session is about peace. Let's talk about peace, conflict, peace, war. And when this is put up as the choice, then what happens is that people will say, okay, if this is the choice, I will not desert who I am, what I grew up with, what I came here for. If this is the choice, I will choose my tradition, my identity, my whole being, my Torah, as Rabbi Melanie Melanie, I don't know what these days it's called, she's a very wise person in any case, a wise teacher, and I will choose my Torah, if that is the choice. And I believe that the big mistake of the peace process since its outset, if we talk about at least the last 20 odd years, has been more or less consciously, more or less, that it has left out the existential identities of the conflicts, the religious elements of the conflict. Having said that, if we act as if we leave it out and we just deal with the other issues, if we can solve in a quick fix, political solution, the easy issues of borders and Jerusalem and a couple of other issues, some little refugees here and there and so on, then we'll make peace, and then we can talk about all the other things afterwards in the process. We'll make a truth commission, we'll do other things afterwards. The problem is that this is very good in theory, it just doesn't work. And although I've been supporting all the attempts, and will, I say already up front, will support all attempts also in the future to try to make peace, what happens is that people get more and more frustrated with every attempt to make peace which doesn't succeed. And we're now in a situation where we're 25 years down the road and we have succeeded in coming to a situation where the people who believe that it's possible to make peace amongst the Israelis and amongst the Palestinians are within a statistical error. That means nobody. So that you know where you have to go for those who want peace. You know where we have to go. We know where we are, and nobody has a clue how to get there. Why? Because there's no belief whatsoever that it is possible. Now my claim is, and I don't have the time here because I have to let my two learned and distinguished colleagues speak. My claim is that the reason why is because we have excluded all those who have been skeptical and opposed to the process, and we've excluded them from the process. We haven't included them in the tent of the process. That's my first claim. And therefore they have been opposed and they have blown up the process. I think it's pretty obvious. I think everybody who's followed the process will agree with me. What you might not agree with me, and which I need to prove to you, and which I maybe think I can, but that will be in the next round, is that it is possible to bring everybody inside the tent, both on the Jewish and the Palestinian side, on the Jewish and Muslim side for this cause of the argument. And we are working intensely now, mostly under the radar, with the more radical Jewish and Islamic side in order to make that happen. This is a long process because it needs a transformation of the peace process and of the thinking in the process, but it's happening. Something radical is happening already today, and more people on both sides are accepting the reality that there are two peoples living here in the Holy Land between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River. Some like it, and some don't like it. But more and more are living with that reality, that there are two peoples, that we're about 12 plus million people, in this area, and we're two peoples, that both peoples have rights, and there is a growing understanding that there are also collective rights for both peoples. And if there are that, then just to work out, also with a religious formula, how these collective rights are expressed, that is already not that difficult. Especially when you come from a value system which is religious, where in the final end, the sovereignty of the land belongs to God. And that we are here as temporary residents. And the humility from which that understanding demands of us, and the precedence, both in Islam and Judaism, of a religious peace which exists in the halachic traditions of both of the Hadith and Halakha, which accept this in a different form and so on, which I don't want to go into, because I think as an introduction, this is enough. I just want to say that as a basis of this, we have established in the organization, which I have the honor to lead, a big center here in Jerusalem called the Mosaika Center, which is mainly a Jewish center, and we're cooperating with 5 Islamic centers, one in East Jerusalem, and one in Kfar Qasem, and one in Ramallah, one in Gaza, and now a center is being established in Cairo, and we have now very close relations with leading Islamists all over the Islamic world, in the whole of the Arab world, and which is supporting our coalition which we've built here in Israel-Palestine. So this is just as to give you a little taste of what is going on. Thank you.
It's my honor now to invite Rabbi Dr. Daniel Roth. I had the privilege also of being a student of yours. I think it was that thrilling Midrash Halakha class. I think your first, about 15 years ago, your first class of Pardes. And also I just want to take, and so yeah, it's wonderful to be in this context with you as well. And I also want to take the opportunity to wish you a happy birthday, 40th birthday. And Hashem, it gets better, it just keeps on getting better.
Thank you. Yeah, everyone, it seems like all rabbis have a midlife crisis at 40. Rabbi Akiva started learning, Rabbi Yochanan started learning, it's a new beginning. So I want to pick up where Rabbi Melchior just ended. And address that my understanding is that really your theory of change, of how religion can help promote peace, and not only conflict, as is the title of our session, is primarily by engaging religious leaders, Muslim leaders, Jewish leaders, and really trying to bring them together in what I would understand to be as track 2 diplomacy, supporting from behind the scenes the track 1 process. What I want to address is something that doesn't negate that, but I think supports it, but it's focused on track 3. Track 3 is really engaging in cultivating a certain culture of peace within civil society, which precedes and continues after any particular peace agreement would perhaps be signed. It is not to negate, again, track 1 or track 2, but it's about what is the very identity of the people that live in that society. What are their core values? How much space do they have for the identity of others that are not like them? And so I personally wear 2 different hats. One is an academic hat that I coordinate a program on religion and conflict resolution at Bar-Ilan University, where there we engage in 2 different tracks of advancing this field of religion and conflict resolution. One is assessment of other track 3 programs. Just a few moments ago, there was some wonderful sessions on the faraway side of Limmud at Har Herzl by the Abrahamic Reunion, Leon McLean, and I believe Yehuda Stolabos. So there are many wonderful religious peace-building organizations that too often are, in my mind, are perceived as being in the fringe or being exotic but not scientifically proven. Are they making a difference? Can religion really help promote this type of cultural change? So the first thing that we've been engaging in is, can we assess this? Can we prove this? Can we help bring this more into the focus of what identity issues are going on in this country? The second part of my academic hat is, can we go deep into religious traditions and texts and search for where those core texts and values that are sometimes sidelined and often forgotten about, bringing them back to the forefront that can help cultivate that culture of peace. So that includes looking at texts that could promote violence and conflict, but also understanding the ambiguity of how those texts could be interpreted to promote peace. My personal research has been about religious models of conflict resolution, in particular the notion of the Rodef Shalom. That I've done research on people that were called in Ashkenazi and Sephardi communities for over 1,000 years Rodfei Shalom, pursuers of peace, which was a tradition that existed in Jewish communities up until the 1950s. Here we just had a Rodef Shalom enter of Eliyahu McLean, who's ordained a Rodef Shalom, as well as two Palestinians who joined him in the Abrahamic Union. Where has that tradition gone culturally? Have we become too much as a Jewish world, Rodfei Tzedek, advocates for justice, but not necessarily skilled as being advocates for peace, understanding how to balance different perceptions of justice? So it's about mining the texts and also assessing the programs. As a practitioner, which is my other hat, I'll mention one more thing about Bar-Ilan. There we have about 65 grad students studying religion and conflict resolution, both an Israeli program and now an international program, where one of the things we try to do is bring in some of those practitioners into the world and to bridge the theory and practice and study how can we really ground this. The second hat is I direct the Center for Judaism and Conflict Resolution at Pardes, which is here in Jerusalem. And there, what we've attempted to do through this center is actually revive this forgotten cultural model of the Rodef Shalom. How can we breathe that back into Jewish identity, mainstream, that can be part of the culture across religious and political divides? And to that end, we've created several different programs. One is, how do we bring that into schools? We have approximately 18 middle schools that are now seeing themselves as Rodef Shalom schools, where they're studying Jewish text on issues like tochacha, constructive communication, machloket, constructive conflict, being a Rodef Shalom, what does it mean to see ourselves as a pursuer of peace? First and foremost within the classroom, right? And then how do we take that a little bit further? How do I understand, oh, there's another school that's very different than me that's also studying that? But that's part in my mind of having become deeply part of our identity, is starting interpersonal, so it's very safe, engaging with text, but also with contemporary theories and practices of conflict resolution. In addition, we're now about to launch a program for rabbis and congregations, for synagogues. How do we engage, very much starting with the very tiny conflicts just over seating or hiring or firing a rabbi that destroy Jewish communities? How do we bring that into our culture? Practicing it on the very interpersonal, but then saying, okay, now how do we use or apply these skills, this identity, to larger conflicts as well? Those are different programs that we've tried to do to go deep of how to bring religion and conflict resolution in a deep way. We've also tried to create programs that will be able to go broader. Right? How do we create this to become part of core Jewish identity, again, across those different divides? To that end, we worked to revive an ancient forgotten Jewish day, okay, which was the 9th of Adar, which is mentioned in all halachic books as a fast day, where the students of Hillel and the students of Shammai were supposed to be the model for constructive conflict engaged in a terrible destructive conflict, according to some sources, with people being killed in the midst of that debate. And we try to use as an indigenous model that can speak across different divides within the Jewish world of how can we strengthen those notions of conflict resolution? How can we ensure we don't go back to that space of internal civil war? And how can we build connections between different organizations that are all out there trying to promote that culture? So to that end, we had about 180 organizations in our second year this past year, all working together in very different sectors, including Encounter that Melanie will speak about, including Mosaica that Rabbi Melchior works with. With Mosaica, I'll just add, and with this I'll conclude, we just began a strategic partnership with Mosaica, which is, in addition to your work of interreligious, they also run 33 mediation centers around the country in different cities. And they gather the whole community of conflict resolution, which just shows that Mosaic understands not only the interreligious aspect, the larger, but also how do you work on the most simplest conflicts of an Arab, a Jew, a secular Jew, a Haredi, all in the same apartment complex, working out their most basic issue. So together with Mosaic, we're now in a process of rebranding 9 Adar to be in its rally day of conflict resolution that would hit across all the different identity groups within Israeli society, Arab, secular Jew, Dati Leumi, Haredi. Not simple, but I believe there is not one day on the calendar in Israel that every single citizen of this country commemorates at the same time. And I don't include Eid al-Adha and Yom Kippur, which falls out only once every 33 years, which Mosaic is working on. So that's part of our theory of how can we create awareness, how can we create connectedness between organizations, how can we assess, and how can we look deeper into the text, which we do in the Beit Midrash at Pardes, and then promote that as being part of our core culture and identity today.
Okay, my words are going to kind of like have 3 parts. I'll just start with the kind of personal framing, and then I'll discuss a bit my work at Encounter, and that picks up on the piece related to what Daniel said, where part of creating a culture of peace is not only the kind of intergroup work, but it's also the intra-group work, like how we work within our communities to create an environment that is more fertile for conflict transformation. And then finally, I'm just going to end with a few thoughts that problematize the whole notion of peace and kind of like invite us to more look at it as a notion of conflict transformation. So just personally, many of you will be familiar with the idea from Rav Kook about that the more that we kind of connect to our specificity, even also our specificity as Jews, then the more deeply that connects us to all human beings. And for me, that's something that really kind of resonates deeply. And it goes again, sometimes people might think that in order to kind of like have more of a universal consciousness, you need to kind of like drop your own particularity. And it feels really important to name, at least in my own experience, and just in general, the possibility that there's a way that we can go more and more into connecting to our own identity that actually connects us to all humans. And for me, that bond and that connection with all humans and the connection to all of humanity and to human struggles and human victories, that's core for my religious experience. And I wanted you to kind of know that at the beginning. I've been working with Encounter for the last 4 years, and some of you might not be, I'm just interested, who here has heard of Encounter? Okay, so excuse me for those people who already might know a little bit of what I'm saying, but Encounter is an educational organisation that's dedicated to increasing the capacity for Jews, mainly US Jews, to be more active agents of change in the conflict. We do programming for Israelis, a very important programming that's often run by our alumni. There are 2 main poles to the work. One of the poles is that we take Jewish leaders to the West Bank to hear from Palestinians, the people sort of outside the headlines, mainly civil society activists and non-violent activists, and a range of other people who are leaders in their field. And it's not dialogue. We go and listen, and that's often a difficult point for people because, sometimes we have this need for reciprocity, and it's not reciprocal in that way, and it does perform an important function, and maybe if you're interested in that we could speak about it later. So that's one of the poles of the work, going to hear Palestinian perspectives, because there are a lot of people who've got very strong opinions about what they think should happen with the conflict that might never have actually spoken to a Palestinian or heard from a Palestinian. And the second pole of our work is about creating spaces for Jews across ideological difference to speak to each other. And there's an assumption in putting so much emphasis on that work, there's an assumption there that if we don't know how to speak to each other across difference within our communities, then we are in no position to be able to change how we relate to other people. And so that's a very, very important part of the work. Now also another thing about the work, that it's very grounded in tradition, and that's when I went on my first trip, that's why it was such a gift, because I didn't have to leave my connection, I didn't have to leave that on the other side of the wall. We could go into the West Bank, we bring in Hakshan food, we have davening according to the different people's davening priorities. Participants are invited to give Divrei Torah, and so their whole experience, at the one hand it's not dialogue, but people can frame their experience in the Jewish terms and the terms of the tradition in which they sit comfortably in, or uncomfortably, just in which they sit, whatever. Okay, so now, okay, so and just the last point I want to say before we open up to kind of the conversation is that I'm going to make a reference to a kind of Torah source, but I also want to say we all know that the Torah can be used in all different ways. Some mavet, some kind of thing, elixir of life, or a drug of death. But it so happens that this week Midrash Rabbah on the parasha compares God to humans and says that when bad things happen for humans, usually we just kind of wedge it in our heart, and sometimes forever something bad might happen and we might hold on to it forever and kind of not move. But God isn't like that, and uses the example that despite the fact that the Egyptians enslaved us with such hard labour, and it was so difficult, that God will still mention about the Egyptians, be careful, don't oppress the Egyptian because we were strangers in their land. And so and then it says Rodef Shalom, and then it's kind of an invitation to kind of pursue peace. And why I'm mentioning that is because sometimes people think of peace as something out there. It's something that the other person isn't ready for. And what this shows us is God, it's like God's work, so to speak, Kaviyakol, that God is the one who puts God's self in the position to kind of have that attitude towards peace. It's not something that someone else isn't ready for. It's something that each one of us has to kind of do within ourselves. And so it's not necessarily an outcome, but it's a way, it's a kind of approach. And it's almost like it's only with that kind of approach that then we can go and actually meet conflict. And it's not about trying to manage or about covering over or about anyone having to deny what's important to them. It's exactly also resonates with what Rabbi Melchior was saying. People who no one wants to let go of the claims that they would die for, that they would stake their life on it, and no one should have to kind of let go of them in the beginning. But when we come to each other with that different perspective, then things can change and and evolve, because we kind of take responsibility to allow the things to transform inside ourselves. But we need to be the first people to take responsibility for that. And just to close, what this means also is that it's not someone else doing it. It's not about the failure of the leaders or whatever. It's actually each time, we have an opportunity each time to make the choice about whether we're going to be people who are going to increase polarization and increase stereotyping, or we're going to be people who are going to reduce it and who are going to increase understanding at every situation, at every moment, every conversation, in our families, in our schools, in our synagogues, in all the situations that we move, we can make that choice, and that's actually the choice that makes a difference. That's not separate from these other things that are happening. In the same what Daniel was saying, that there needs to be a culture of peace in order to make other kind of arrangements work. And we're part of that. That's not something else that someone else does. That's something that actually we create, and we continue to create moment by moment. So I just want to invite either of you if there's anything you want to say, and then we'll open up to...
There's a lot to say. First of all, it's not necessarily true that it's easy, that if we can't make peace between ourselves, that it's easier to make peace between ourselves than with the others.
I didn't say it's easier.
Okay.
I just said it's...
You said if we can't make between ourselves...
I mean we need to do both.
I'm just saying that when I work with, as I do, with my Orthodox and Haredi colleagues in religious peace, they will much prefer to meet with the Islamic Jihad than to meet with the Reform Rabbi. That is much easier. So I'm just saying this as a side remark. Yeah, no, okay. I think that we need to think about, this is why we work a lot. I don't disagree that to change the culture and the language of peace is very, very necessary. And before the peace, and during the peace, and after the peace. The only thing is that if we don't have peace, then I am very much afraid that this will be very marginal. The problem is that we're up against so strong forces who don't have an interest in changing that culture of peace and the language of peace. And every time we do something, we speak to a group, and I do it every day, so I know something about it. But you have this massive input of media, of social media, of formal media, who is playing into the fears, especially in the world we have today, and we are cultivating the world of fears. Just give you one example, something I dealt with, and I just came back this week also from a very short couple of days in the US, but also spoke to many audiences there, several thousand people, and I see every time I go, they're more and more afraid. It's much worse there than it is here. But here it's pretty bad, but it's much worse there. Yeah. And they're fed with all these. But I see the image. I'll give just one example of something which we dealt with now. A very small example, but there was a guy who went up on the Temple Mount, a Muslim who went up on the Temple Mount and made a selfie of his speaking, saying that the Jews were baking matzah with Christian blood or with Muslim blood, and that was why the Holocaust came, and everybody knows it, and it's been proven, and all the worst anti-Semitic pictures. It was a selfie he had, and this went on memory television. He was presented as a preacher of Al-Aqsa who is preaching there several times every week, is one of the central preachers of Al-Aqsa, and this was on the top of the news of Arutz 10 and on the front page of Yediot Achronot, and it went out on all the mails, all the emails, and he was arrested, the whole thing. And I called my, this was about 2 months ago, I called my friends, both on Al-Aqsa and in the Ulama and the Islamic friends. I said, who is this guy? Nobody ever heard about it. Nobody ever heard about it. And they made all their research and so on to try to find out who is this guy. And it turned out that he's not a sheikh, and he's not an imam, and he's not there. Everybody can go up on Al-Aqsa, you can take a selfie, you don't need anybody, there was nobody who listened to him. And you can take somebody, have somebody film this. It goes on memory, it's on the front page. Everybody thinks that he must be, at least the chief rabbi of Palestine. And it's all over the place. Now, as a result of this, I said, this is bad. This is bad. By the way, it's now come 6 weeks after somebody again woke up to the whole thing. There was on another program of Arutz 10, and now it went the whole thing again. Now it's again coming, all the media and all the internet and all the same guy and the same thing and everything. Once again. And now and you can have 20 educational programs and this, and it's nothing but we've seen it. We've seen what all the people say and all the hatred. It's not that there's no hatred, yes? We have a lot of hatred. There's a lot of it, but you see, so we went further than that. Now the leading people of the Waqf, they now took up this. They now put down, as a result of this, a committee now which is going through so that all the official things will over the next couple of years have a sign that these are the official representatives, and there'll be a sign on everything which will be filmed and so on. It will need cooperation of the Israeli police, which they're not sure that they will get. But they have decided to take this seriously. They don't want that this kind of hatred should come out and then. I'm just saying it as an example of how easy it is for one litzan, one clown hater and so on, to build down something which we're all trying to build up. And that's why it's very important to have the central. A year ago, this is the last thing I'll just mention. A year ago, there was a big important rabbi who has come out sometimes very moderate, Rav Yoel bin Nun. He wrote a big article on Ynet, which was on the front page of Ynet, which says that there's not one Islamic leader who's come out against the Islamic State. He says he knows that there are Islamic leaders like that, but not one. It was on the front page of Ynet, which is our biggest internet news list. It was on the front page for 3 weeks with his picture. Not one Islamic leader. I met him and we were together on a panel a very short time after. I said, Rav Yoel, how can you say such a thing? All the central Islamic authorities and poskim and this have come out and said this is totally against all of Islam. And you write such a, he said, but I never read about it. He said, but you read Makor Rishon and Ynet and you don't read about it. You don't see. So he said, but can you prove it? So I started sending him material from all the big Islamic authorities in the Arab world. And he said, okay, I got it. Stop sending me. And he wrote a refute, which of course was never put on the front page. And it was down on Yahadut somewhere, and nobody ever saw it. And so that's the story.
Thanks.
I just want to make one quick comment, but it might open up a whole bunch of can of worms, which is that you made the claim that we know where we are, and we know where we need to go, and it's just a question of how we get there. I'm not sure that is as consensus today, and I think that's a question in terms of what is the peace, and what is religious peace, and where are we heading? And I think that's a question that is definitely in people's minds. especially as we talk about how we get there. And I think that's all the more reason why we have to also engage in track 3 and not only focus on the track 2 around a particular solution, because we don't know exactly where this is all going to end up, or at least many people don't feel that there's consensus on that one. So.
What I'd like to now, because I also want to be respectful of finishing kind of on the time, I think we'll try to finish at just 5 past. We started late and the next...
4:15, have till 4:15.
Oh, we do? Oh, fine. Oh, we're doing great. Cool. Okay, great. So, okay. I was thinking we had to finish at 4. Fine. So, questions?
I have a remark, but I think there's a problem when we ask the question if religion can promote peace instead of conflict. So it means it's quite clear now that the conflict has very deep religious roots. So these categories of religion and politics are problematic. If religion is really separated from politics, so how we can help in this field of politics? Because the conflict is on the is between states and people and about land so I think that we have to think that once more. And it's clear that Islam is very political, but Judaism too is very political. I mean, Moses has not created a religion; he has created first a state, with his laws and his constitution and with the land and people. So, Rabbi Melchior, when you said that one thing that can bring us together is this idea that God is sovereign. It means sovereignty in the political terms too. I would like to bring this, and maybe if you have something to say about that, is that brought me to an idea that one solution could be a kind of supranational federation, because Ribono Shel Olam, Rab el Alamin, is not a national sovereign. Our problem is to have two national sovereigns that want to eliminate each other. But if we accept it between Muslims and Jews, that we have the same sovereign, and the land belongs to God, and we have a way to translate this in a political way, so maybe religion can help.
I'll just answer very shortly. I don't think that, I think that we have, when I said that, I meant between the religious people, that this is something we can agree on. There's other agreements which we need to make between religious and secular people. Israel is not a religious state. That's another issue that we talked about last hour. But amongst the religious people, we can agree on this issue. I, for one, do not believe in this issue of one state, the one this. I don't think it's. This is a long issue, which maybe was what Daniel was referring to. I think this is, everybody who talks about a one-state solution, I think it's a one-state non-solution. There are all kinds of terms up in there. This country is not going to give up on the concept of a Jewish state. It's not going to happen. And therefore, those who are going to work in that direction are working for some utopian idea. It's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen that the Palestinians will give up also on their state. I think also a vast majority of both peoples want that. They just don't believe that the other side wants it. But there might be concepts which will have to change, and ideas and this, and all kinds of words have been thrown out, like the confederation, If it makes it easy for people, if they can say the word confederation and believe that with this that they've got everything, then for my sake, if both sides think that they can get Eretz Yisrael Shlema and Waqfa Shalem, then for my sake, let them call it confederation.
Biblical Israel was federation of tribes.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm going to give you a question that will also help you make Daniel. So I appreciate that you can't give a full answer to this in a minute or so, but if you could just differentiate, because you use these terms, conflict resolution, peace, and pacifism. in terms of what religion, in terms of in your idea of what Judaism has to say about that. I mean, you didn't define your terms. You presented this. Are they the same? Are they different? Conflict resolution, peace, and pacifism.
I think we're gonna try to take. Should we try to do one?
And then
Okay, so personally, I use the word conflict resolution not for its etymological meaning, but because it's the only word that I can get people that are in the peace camp and people that are in the alternative dispute resolution kind of lawyer camp to say that's what we do. So it's pragmatic, because I subscribe to the notion in Hasidut that the Rodef Shalom, the pursuer of peace, is likened to a master doctor. And that you have to constantly know what the illness and what the patient is in front of you, so you don't whip out the wrong strong medicine or take out the knife and then kill your patient. So if you always use the same exact method, the same exact tactic for how to work through a conflict with every single situation, you're going to cause a lot more harm than others. So for me, conflict resolution is not a particular method. It's looking at a broad set of possible methods of how to work through a conflict, and then judging on a particular situation what's the best solution. Maybe that could be, I don't know about pacifism, but non-violence at a particular moment. Maybe that could be conflict management at a certain time, and different stages of a conflict might need different medicines at that moment. Generally, the world, if you noticed, Malka used conflict transformation.
No, I thought you were talking about religion, what Judaism has to say about
Yeah,
this.
I was talking about Jewish models of conflict resolution, correct. Which is, absolutely. Oh, absolutely, because that's my whole claim, is that there are multiple ways within Jewish tradition of values and methods that can find a parallel equivalent within secular theories of how you manage constructively a conflict. And empowering individuals with that toolkit and with that mindfulness of how they can engage in conflicts in different ways, I think opens it up. Sometimes it's dialogue, sometimes it's not dialogue, as you heard, different theories. In terms of peace, my definition of peace is really healthy machloket. It's really the unity of opposites, again, quoting Rav Kook and Rav Froman. It's really about not the uniformity, but it's about how do I balance constructively conflicting needs and perspectives. It's a constant moment of tension. But it's not about everyone just being the same and loving each other with no conflict at all. Conflict's good as long as people don't kill.
I want to just speak to your model of the doctor, because I don't know if you remember, but when you came spoke with Encounter, I responded to that. Because for me personally, my understanding of conflict transformation isn't that I'm kind of like a doctor and that I'm sort of giving a prescription for other people, but I liken myself to the person with all the diseases. And what I mean by that is that by having a sense of finding a place inside myself where I can kind of like relate to, not to say that the doctor can't do this as well, but that where I can like relate to where each person is coming from, and from that place have the expansiveness to be able to kind of like sit with the people. Yes, so I think now we'll move to taking a few questions at once. Yeah. Oh, hang on, maybe please just have a woman and then you. Thanks.
I'm Deborah, and one of my concerns lately is any relationship needs a certain sense of integrity in order to be able to communicate. So what if you have some sort of religious notion that in terms of infidels, you're allowed to engage in Geneva's thought, you're allowed to deceive. I need to be able to talk to somebody who I feel is going to be straight with me. The way they talk to me is the way they talk to their family, to their own community. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how to deal with such notions.
Okay, great, thanks. We'll come to that. I can remind us of the question, but yeah.
So I take my cues to try to understand history by the Rebbes of our time, and Rav Kook Zatzal, and then from modern history, particularly Rav Nazir, David Cohen Zatzal. And this always when I read this, it still sticks with me, and I wonder how much of this is what's being played out in history. During the 48 war, he wrote a letter to Lebnei Yeshiva B'Tzva Israel. And he says, these yamim, these hard days, messianic birth pangs, Leidat Malchut Israel, the birth of the kingdom of Israel, the time Kamu Aleinu Avenu, our enemies are coming around us to destroy us, and he names the enemies: Sur, Damascus, Ammon, Moab, Umitzrayim, Uberosham, Amalek, Ve'edom. And he names Amalek as at the head of the source. And then I've been watching history, and there does seem to be a certain poison that keeps going and having such much passion, and it's been poisoning everybody. I mean, I was here in the 70s when it was just really, it was very nice. Yehuda v'Shamron, the West Bank, we were going everywhere, people were everywhere, and Arabs and Jews were getting along very well. But there is a certain poisoning and a certain passion for this war that he says this is what the Torah is teaching about Amalek is, and here it is at this point in history. And so that makes me sort of pessimistic. And I do know, and I have to say this one, Rav Kook in a letter in 1908 did say that the brotherly love of Yitzchak and Ishmael and Yaakov and Esau, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, will titgaber al kol otam mehumot. He uses the word mehumot. It's going to overcome all the disturbances. V'titafchan la'or v'lechesed olami. That's a division of the Torah. He says because Yaakov and Esau hugged each other. He says we have to know that's where history is going. But it does seem we have to take on, and maybe together we have to take on this enemy with those people on that side that understand that Amalek has infected them as well, it seems.
Daesh.
I mean, it seems to be pretty strong passion for destruction.
Were we?
Oh yeah, I just yeah.
Well, I'd like to. What do you think? Are we dealing with Amalek?
In a minute, we're going to have. I'll just ask the speakers to have some closing words. But is there any other? Is there anyone's got any sort of concise other questions they want to add to the mix? Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit of a side comment or addition to what my colleague Yitzhak said is maybe in our situation now where things weren't clear. I think the last time in history where there was, in recent history, in this century, that there was clear battle between good and evil, and that even in the peace camp they needed a wake-up call was basically Nazi Germany. And afterwards, all the other conflicts, Vietnam and what goes on in the Middle East and other places, it isn't really clear who the good guys and bad guys are because there's some right on both sides. So maybe in some senses, almost prophetically and apocalyptically, this whole concept of like Al-Qaeda and ISIS was God's way of giving us some kind of clarity of saying, yes, there is really such a thing, such a test that we're going to be put out where to make peace you also have to fight evil first and root out evil, and because it's something that I think is even unparalleled in the history of Islam.
Okay, thanks. And just,
I was wondering if any of you could speak about programs, like I think the Radav Shalom program that might be going on in any of the Arab sector schools. And I ask because I am a teacher in Arab school, and I've met a lot of students that have no access, and I've been in a lot of schools where there's just no openness, and I'm wondering if Radav Shalom has been introduced to any Arab schools, or if you know, because a lot of your programs seem to be adult focused, like speaking to the clergy, or going and hearing from other adults.
okay, and just Nadia, because you're the big organizer, I need. Is there anything you want to say?
No, it's a really embarrassing question. But I think I'd like to ask you guys, and also maybe Eliyahu, it's all very well to say, you know, Radav Shalom, I want peace, let's talk about peace, but as I think Deborah said, like what happens if either the other side just isn't interested talking about peace, or you don't really believe that they're interested. And in the same way that we're told, I think in meditation, you know, like spread the love everybody, but what happens if it's difficult for you to love everybody? And what do you guys do? Do you say, you know what, I'm going to love these people and they're going to slap me in the face? How do you deal with that?
Okay, great. Thanks.
Peacemakers.
Okay, thanks. So I invite all of you to just close.
Okay, I'm going to try to relate to those four comments in one swoop. First is one of the founding fathers of the concept of integrating religion and conflict resolution is a professor named Scott Appleby in Notre Dame, where he introduced the concept of the ambivalence of the sacred. Religion doesn't promote peace. Religion doesn't promote conflict. It can do this, it can do that. It's a question of how it's going to be interpreted. So, the ambiguity of religion, for example, is who's in the in-group, who's in the out-group. We have that very much. Who's in the, how do we speak to, what is Behaft L'Orecha Kamocha? Who's Kamocha? You only ohev the people that are exactly like us, who are religious, Jews, Torah, and mitzvot, and if they step out of that, then we have an obligation to hate them. I mean, how religion is applied and where's the in-group, out-group is a key thing. All religions have models of conflict resolution. It's a question of how expansive are they being applied, that Islam is suffering from, Judaism is suffering from, and I think that's a question that challenges all. That relates to your comment about Amalek. Look, Amalek is a key ambiguity within religion, and I think one of the interesting things about Amalek is that we often say Amalek is all evil. Do we have any understanding of Amalek? Do we have any understanding of how Amalek has been assigned and interpreted in all sorts of different ways, right? From the Armenians in the 3rd century to Martin Luther King referring to the Jews as Amalek, to the Christian pilgrims in America referring to the Native Americans as Amalek, to the Haredim referring to the secular as Amalek. Who's not being referred to? Amalek is a way of delegitimizing, dehumanizing the other who we don't understand and we just think are crazy. But here's the thing, Chazal were not afraid to understand Amalek. And Chazal introduced us that why did Amalek actually want to attack us? So they say, one of the reasons is because their great-great-grandfather had all of his money and his life put at risk because Yaakov took advantage of Esav. And therefore they were told from generation to generation, Zachor et asher asa lecha Yisrael. And they passed it on, Timche et Zecher Yisrael. Until they had finally the moment when we were hungry and thirsty like Esav, that they wanted to wipe us out. Another Perush in the Midrash says, why did Amalek come and attack? Because they were the only ones who understood that they needed to do a preemptive strike because the Israelites were coming in to do genocide against every single one of the nations in Eretz Canaan. And they were included. And they said, if we don't act right now, before they are armed and fully ready to attack us, we better do something. Do we have any understanding about how Amalek came about to be who they are? Because if we don't re-narrative them, if we don't have any understanding of their humanity, we will just continue to be afraid, and when you're afraid, you start to Amalekite people. Which raises the last point about the peacemakers and about schools. Melchior has been very modest. It hasn't mentioned all the programs that he's involved in, but one of them, Gita Chazani, Melchior, right? Gita Chazani who had been working with Mosaica for 15 years, has now created an incredible program where, again, it's not about contact hypothesis where you naively might bring Jews and Palestinians together and say that kumbaya, that we're just going to solve all problems. She's created a program to work within Islamic schools, parallel to working within religious Zionist schools, which I will say also, just as a shout out, is partly being hosted in my program at Bar Ilan. But it's really Gita's program, because she understands that you really have to work in track 3 also. You got to work with the teachers, you have to work with the schools, and there are programs like that. Salam, the Institute for Justice and Peace within Islam, has a lot of programs of conflict resolution for madrasa schools. You can look online, there are a lot of programs. How much do we know this in our narrative? Like Melchior was saying, how much do we promote this, or how much do we want to hide it? Because it's difficult, and it's not known. But there are programs, and I don't think it should just be a naive piece. I think there has to be, as I said beforehand, there has to be constant academic assessment, what's working, what's not working, and critical thinking.
I just have to add to this, because Daniel forgot about the most important Amalek, and I have to say this as my hobby of being a chief rabbi of Norway, that in 1905, the then rabbi of Norway declared the Swede to be the Amalek of our time. You need to put things in proportion. And that was at the time when there was a near war between Norway and Sweden. It had been 3 months already in Norway at the time. And I'm saying this because it's very dangerous. This is what we're doing now in this country. It started with the Daesh, Islamic State, and then it continued with the Iranians, and then it continued with the Palestinians, and now it's all the Muslims. who are all Amalek, and you hear it more and more. And you hear it and you read it in the emails. They're all Amalek, and we have to get rid of all of them. Now I agree. I'm not a pacifist. I agree that Islamic State should be fought for everything. Islamic State this. I'm not a pacifist. I think that they're people you need to fight with and have war with, and this. But Amalek, we have a tradition that Amalek was not there anymore, and that doesn't mean that there are not traditions which are very evil in our world. I do want to relate one word to the naivete, or first of all, yes, maybe there is a naivete. Tamim tiye Hashem Elokecha. This is part of what we are. I believe in fairy tales. I have this tradition in my family. We go back to Hans Christian Andersen, who was adopted by my family a couple of hundred years ago in Copenhagen. So we have this. But I want to tell you very seriously, this is realpolitik. This is a question of our survival. Doesn't mean we have a lot of fears and a lot of hatred on both sides. And it's not symmetrical necessarily. But it's not something which is 100% only hatred from the other side and we all love and embrace this. That's not how it works. And we have to make this change, this transformation. And there are people who can come from up down and can come from down up, from educators, from religious leaders and so on. It needs to be, this is the world we live in. We can't live in a country, here between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, half the people are Muslim Arab Palestinians, nearly half. This is the situation. If we want to live here, in this city, we're in Jerusalem, Limmud, we're nearly 40% of the population here in our city are Arab Palestinians. And we need to make this change. What I'm telling you is that with quite a long experience, and I've worked with this now for many years, every time we sit with serious, responsible, influential leaders who have an influence in their communities, who are teaching a new generation of coming leaders of Islamists and Imams and so on, in Shechem and in Hebron and in Gaza and in the Arab world now, which slowly, I think I'm probably the person in this country who's traveled more than anybody else in this country with leading Islamists in the Arab world. Now over the recent months, meeting those who have influence over tens of minutes and slowly breaking, they have all the negative feelings about us, and with many reasons, good reasons and bad reasons. But the ice is being broken with people who have this influence, and they want to be combined into a peace. They want to put the Israeli-Palestinian conflict behind them. And we can be a part of a change. With the new, we have to think a little bit about out of the box. I've also changed my opinions on several of these issues over these last years. I don't want to go into detail. But it's possible. Also with our skeptics and I'm working with people very far from me politically and with the things I believe in. I'm in a different camp than the people I work with on the Jewish side. And it's difficult for me because I disagree with them on practically everything. But those are the people who we need to bring inside the tent if we want to make the change here. And it can happen, and it will happen.
Thank you.
I forgot to pass around a sheet, but if anybody is interested in hearing any more about Hardetz or about our center, I'm sure also about any of the other programs, you're welcome to sign in your email as well.